Hey there, it's Ben Halsall here, and here in this tutorial we're going to be having a look at how we deal with some problems that can pop up when you're trying to make transparency on smart objects that you've placed in Adobe Photoshop. So we're going to run through the whole process of placing an object, of creating the transparency, and then how we deal with kind of refining our transparency, and in particular dealing with some of the errors that can pop up when you try to delete areas of a smart object, which can be really frustrating in Photoshop. But we're going to kind of cover a few of the different tips and tricks for fixing those problems. So keep watching all the way through to the end, and let's dive in and have a look at how we fix problems that can pop up when you're creating transparency with Adobe Photoshop. So we're going to dive right in here and have a look at some problems that might pop up when you are trying to create transparency in images that you've placed in Photoshop. So we're going to place an image so that we have something to work with. So I'm going to go to File and Place Embedded, and we'll select this image of me on a beach. And basically when you place an embedded image, before you can really work on it or make any transparency, you need to hit enter, and also if you want to rescale it, you can do that as well at this particular point in time in Photoshop CC 2020. So we're going to hit enter here, and basically now we have in our design a smart object. So you can see on the icon on the bottom right here on our layers panel we have the smart object icon. So if you don't have a smart object, you'll just see a kind of regular image without this little icon in the bottom right. And basically what that means is that if we, for instance, select the background of this image, we'll just quickly drag around here, we can't actually delete it. Okay, so basically we get an error from Photoshop popping up saying cannot complete your request because the smart object is not directly editable. So we'll click OK to that, and I'm going to deselect it. There's actually a smarter way of making transparency. So we're going to just select me in the middle here. So we'll drag with my quick selection tool, which is what I'm using here, across my body here, and it should select it pretty well. There's kind of nice contrast between the foreground and background, so this is a good image to use, and that's what you want to look for in an image that you're going to make some transparency in. There's some issue with the glasses and stuff like that. We'll zoom in here, and by holding down the Alt key we can subtract from our selection these little gaps in the arms here. So we'll just quickly kind of click in here and select those, and we can fix all this stuff up later. Now the issue that can pop up sometimes is that when you make your selection, and I'm just using the square brackets to increase and decrease my brush size, if we make a mistake here, and we're going to leave that there for a little bit later on, and we've also got the glasses up here which we'll fix now. So we'll just grab a much smaller brush, so the left square bracket, and I'm going to drag along the frame of the glasses there, and we've got that, and we'll just subtract the frame of the glasses in here. We can actually add a bit of semi-transparency in there a little bit later on, and I'm going to use Command and 0 or Control and 0 on the PC to bring that back to fit to screen. So basically now, to make transparency in this, obviously we know we can't delete areas of the image, so we're going to come down to our layers panel and use this layer mask option. So basically the layer mask, as you can see in the layers, creates a little black and white image that allows you to make transparency in parts of your image. You can see where the image is black, this little layer mask image is black, my image is hidden, I have transparency. Now one thing that can pop up is problems with the selection of this layer mask. So if I select the left hand icon here, my original image, and come back to, for instance, my polygonal lasso tool, which I can use to refine areas of my image where my selection wasn't quite right. So I'm just going to select this area to remove it, and we're going to illustrate the problem first before we kind of show the solution. So basically draw around this area. And so now with this selected, I'm going to hit delete, and again we get that same error popping up, and the reason again for this could not complete your request because the object is not directly editable is because we have that smart object layer selected. So I'm going to come to my layer mask, and now there's two things we can do. If we press delete, it will remove it, and basically what's happening here in the smart object is that instead of actually deleting part of the original image, we're deleting that white little part of the layer mask here. In fact, if we come to our menus here, we can change our panel options so our icons are a bit bigger. So you can see here that image has a little bit of white popping out on the right hand shoulder, on the left hand shoulder, and basically when we hit delete, it now changes it to black. And the reason it's doing that is because my background is black here. So if you have different colors here or your background is white, then it won't work. It will do something different. So this delete function here relies on the fact that my background is in the default mode, which we can set up by clicking this little box here. I can also grab my brush tool, and with the brush tool I can paint black on that area. So I can basically paint that out, and it's actually painting on that layer mask, okay, which comes in handy when we get into areas like this. So if I first of all actually remove my selection, so I'm going to go to select and deselect. If I zoom in here, and importantly we are still highlighting the layer mask, not the image, so we want to be on this right hand side of this. We're going to make this brush smaller, and I'm going to right click and make it a little bit harder. Okay, and so basically now I can paint in this area and kind of look for areas where I want to really refine the edge, and using the square brackets get down really small and kind of get into the niggly detail of masking if you have an image that requires that sort of detail. So here I might grab my polygonal lasso tool and just select this area, and I'm going to grab my brush tool, and again we will just paint inside that selection, and it will control where we're painting, and we've again painted on that layer mask and removed that area. So this is useful with these tools for kind of selecting these areas of the image which you sometimes really can't get into with some of the automatic tools in Photoshop, especially if your image is of a lower quality, and this image is sharp-ish but not super sharp. So we can basically increase the size of this and mask out, and then keep going and just gradually fix up our image. And all this time I'm, as I keep mentioning, working on that layer mask to fix this up. So that is a quick overview of some issues that might pop up when you are trying to create transparency with an image. In particular, just making sure that you know what kind of image you're placing. If you are just using a regular image that doesn't have the smart object option here, then basically obviously you can select that and just delete areas. But because it's a smart object, which is a really good type of layer to use because it allows us to scale things down and rescale them back up without losing any quality, then using the layer mask is going to be the way to go. So hopefully this is a helpful tip if you're struggling to kind of get that transparency in your images. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention was the glasses. So if we wanted to make a little bit of semi-transparency here, then basically what I can do is I'm going to grab my color here. So I'm going to select a gray here and click OK, and I'm going to select my brush mode to lighten here, and that will mean I'm not going to make anything lighter than white. So I can basically kind of paint in here, and it will allow me to kind of create a bit of transparency in the glasses there. It's not quite perfect, but you can see that means we get a little bit of that lens effect. And if, for instance, we just quickly make a shape, we'll show how that's working. So now, just drop this below here, you can see that the transparency is coming through that area of the image. So basically the glasses are semi-transparent because we've painted a little bit of grey onto our layer mask here, and that's allowing the glasses to keep that little bit of transparency and a bit more realism, I guess. So hopefully that's been useful. If you have any questions about Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, or things like Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro, then do drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next tutorial.